Right. So thank you for rejoining us. We're focused again in this session on the big picture, on the why we need to change and the how we can change. How can we get the right vision for education? How can we then enlist the right people to help us deliver it? And then how can we stick around with patience to then see those changes through? And I'm delighted that to kick off this session, before we move to another fantastic panel, we have Her Royal Highness Princess Laurentien, who is the UNESCO Special Envoy on literacy, but also has been a huge champion of child participation and emancipation. So please join me in welcoming Princess Laurentien to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jack Ma said that he is an amateur. And I would really love to take you for the next half an hour or so in a world where you, at the end, all feel amateurs. And where I feel that, and where you are champions of knowing other innovators in education, adult educators, that everyone feels amateurs. And I'm not saying this lightheartedly, and I hope that at the end of my speech, you will all feel completely confused. And confused about all the work you've been doing for decades and decades and decades. And everything I say is without any kind of moral judgment. I stand here as a 53-year-old, having worked on literacy and on education for many years, and I am slightly ashamed of myself that we failed our students as adults. And I stand here, and everything I say to you, I stand here, I feel, as a translator. I stand as a translator about the insights of young people. I'll share in a moment what my specific insights are and credibility about this, about the insights of children and young people and the insights and the kind of thinking of adult policymakers and how to translate what children really say, what they really mean and what they really feel, not as focus groups, but as real insights into the policy interventions that we can make. So it would be very odd for me to talk a lot about what I think. And I stand here, therefore, as a translator, and I want to start, therefore, also with a quote from Kim Hardonier from New Zealand, and a number of young people, they wrote me letters in advance of today's forum, and I am going to quote extensively from their letters. So anybody, that's also what we do with children. We tell children, write down what I say, and then we never do the same as adults. So I would do the same, write down what she says. Don't write down what I say, write down when I quote the young people. So she says, it is not only about she says, everyone has always taken the world of the past and helped it bloom into the present. But we are the future. She's 18 years old, by the way, dreaming of the world we want to create and struggling to find ways to get there through the obligated paths of the old world. The past is beautiful and terrifying. The present is worrying. I will come back to that. And the future is being written right now. What can we little individuals do? And she says, and that's heartbreaking, she says, not much. I won't change the world, but if I will do all I can to leave it better than I found it, that's what I will do. So the sense of disempowerment of young people is something in those two words, what can little people do, not much, is what really turns my stomach. So I would like to share 3 thoughts with you in 3 areas. One, I would like to pick up also that what Jack Ma has been saying and Andreas has been saying, and talk about what I would call yesteryear's mindset. In other words, that the problem of educational systems are being designed by adults on the basis of these outdated assumptions and outdated frameworks. I want to talk about the unexpected experts, the power of educational solutions being co-created in dialogue structurally with young people and adults alike. And in the end, I would like to share a few key ingredients, just like Jack did, on the basis of the insights of young people of my last 10 years of experience, specifically on working with children. So my background is indeed literacy on the one hand, the hard-nosed literacy, reading issues, but even more importantly, having been in this intergenerational dialogue on a foundation that I set up, the Missing Chapter Foundation 10 years ago, not as a way to help young people, but as a way to help adults, to bring creativity into the boardroom, to bring creativity of the mindsets of the children into the minds and the decision-making processes at adult level. And I tell you, it's been a hell of a ride, and it is tougher than you think, because my goodness, are adults like you and I completely closed-minded. And we know that research shows that children are more creative. But the strange thing is, why aren't we putting that into practice? Because it makes us look like fools, we think. But what it does, if we do actually help children to say, now what is it that you think? And again, not as a focus group, but meander the mind of the child into the decision-making process of the adults. And I tell you, there is real magic that happens. And what it turns out, which I didn't realize when I started this 10 years ago, of how much it does to children's minds, where suddenly the children who adults and who teachers are saying, yeah, they're not the eloquent ones, they're the ones who are not really speaking up. Well, they're the ones that I will see. And in the end, when you let them to do free research, let them do free thinking, they're the ones who blossom and who will come up to you and they will say, finally, I was able to say what I think. So I would also like to say that if we're always looking for the eloquent students, for the good students, we're missing out all the jewels at the bottom who are invisible. And I'm currently undertaking, and I would invite anybody to come and join this, a global study with the help of the Chen Foundation in China to do a global study. Where are the good examples of child participation in the educational system? And I would love to do this together with the OECD, together with many of you, and to actually say, where are the examples? And the failures are also the good examples. So the first few thoughts that I want to share is about this yesterday's mindset. And it's been touched upon, so I will run through it. But again, just to highlight this, when you and I were growing up, and I would like you to go back to your childhood and to actually, because you are the world leaders on education, you are leaders who can take this thinking further. We have to admit that when we were growing up, the world was less complex, it was less connected, amongst many other things. So when you and I were growing up, we were different children. The world was a safer place, we felt safer, and we were less informed. We were less aware about the environment. We were what adults still call today's children, they call them naive. We were naive. Today's children are not naive. Because the world that we make in our lives is in their iPhone 24 hours a day, and it keeps them awake at night. 1 in 3 in the Netherlands, supposedly a place with the happiest children in the world, 1 in 3 young people are in too much stress over social media. So in other words, that world is constantly in the minds of children. They are not naive. Can we skip that from our vocabulary? And so what that means is that when you and I were growing up, our relationship with adults was fundamentally different. We needed adults to show us the world. We looked up to adults and to say, wow, you've been to this place and you've been to that place and tell me about this. We were the bearers of knowledge and of insights and of adventures. Now, YouTube is an adventure. Social media is an adventure, good or bad. And so when they look at tutorials, be it for makeup or for anything else, the people on YouTube are much more exciting than the people standing in the classroom. That's the standard that children today have. So that's why our relationship has changed. So we have to wake up and smell the coffee, that children today are better equipped. They live in a different world, which has huge consequences for what their needs are. And I'll come back to the needs issue. And yet, as was established this morning already, the educational systems are designed with what I call this yesteryear's mindset. And they're still based on the wrong perception of who children are and what they are. And when I talk about children, I obviously talk about young people. The age group for the kids' councils in Missing Chapter is between 9 and 12, but I work with children as young as 4 years old, and we go up to teenagers. So I'd like to challenge you and challenge the entire global educational community that we have been having conferences, no matter how fantastic it is that we're having this conference, but you and I have been sitting in conferences for decades, where we actually, not as eloquently and succinctly perhaps as has been talked about today, and I really applaud OECD, but to be very honest, we have been knowing these messages for decades as well. We've been knowing for decades that children are more creative than adults. So perhaps by not having an understanding, a real understanding of the power of children, is perhaps what has been standing in the way. And why do we as adults actually think that we alone can determine what children need educationally? We innovate and we innovate, but are we actually addressing that fundamental view on children today? And I love this idea in New Zealand, numbers, names and needs, this mass personalization. I think that is really where we should go, and that's what children are telling us where they should be going. And that brings me to my second point, the unexpected experts. So in other words, I feel that we've been consistently ignoring the closest allies, experts, advisors, whatever you want to call them, of children into our educational system. Again, not as a way to have a focus group. We have a plan, we know what to do, and we're going to test what we have been doing, whether children like it or not. And generally we say, do you want the sauce to be green or do you want the sauce to be blue or red? No, to fundamentally co-design educational systems with children. We've been ignoring the biggest resource that we have as advisors. Some of you are looking at me, yeah, right. It's fine. I fully understand. This is part of the world that I'm living in. Some of you, I see a little twinkle in your eyes. 3 arguments why I think we should take this seriously, not as a nice to have, but as a need to have. The one thing, it's very clear. We adults, we say that we're experts of our lives. Why wouldn't children be? They are also experts of our lives, of their lives. They know what they need to be motivated. A very small example, a tiny example of young children. When you ask them consistently, and this is not just in the Netherlands, but in other countries, I always ask them, what is most important in your day? Now, we will come up with all kinds of things about calculus and about this and that. You know what they tell me? The handshake and the eye of the teacher. And many children have said over the last 10 years, and if I don't get that handshake, it is as if I don't exist the entire day. And who are we to then come and stuff it with content and all kinds of things if we don't have the humility to just say, welcome, I see you. That's where this policy intervention of mass personalization, it starts with the handshake and the eye. So let's not forget that. They can tell us on content what they need. Entrepreneurship, sustainability, citizenship are all kinds of issues that they want. They can look at the approach. And one of the key elements over the last 10 years that I've learned, if there's one word that I want to convey to you, what they feel and ask for, it's autonomy. Autonomy. But again, we have to let go of our old-fashioned adult thinking, we know best. I'll come back to that. And finally, they say, we want certain skills. So they have all the insights. They want social skills. They want collaboration. They're the best advisor to OECD. They come up with similar ideas where they say, we want to know how to move in the world. So that's the first reason. Children know very well how to motivate, what they need to be motivated. And the second one, which is very interesting, that is so often forgotten and overlooked. We have a convention that is the most ratified convention in the entire world. In the entire world. And it's the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And there's one article, the Kids' Rights Index, which looks at 190 countries across the globe every year, looks at the implementation of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And interestingly, the one article that is least implemented, in fact, not implemented in any place structurally, it's Article 12. Now, I know that maybe Article 12 is not what you have for breakfast, but Article 12 is child participation. And it says, children have the right to express their opinion freely and to have that opinion considered in any matter or procedure affecting the child. Now, what a shame. How come in the educational system this article is not consistently applied? And here we are, adults, always thinking that we have all the answers. So that's the second argument that I hope for some of you will actually say, wow, yes, Article 12. If there's one thing that I want to do in life, is to be the bearer of the Article 12 and bring it into the world of adults and policy making. So the third element, which I think is incredibly important as an educational system, because an educational system is of course not a school environment. That's how we used to design it. That's how the Millennium Goals were. We had quality education, access to education, also important, but it's about the quality. And it doesn't start and stop at the building or at the classroom. Education is learning broadly, as was also mentioned this morning. So when you take it to children back to the iPhone into their world the entire day and the entire night sometimes, they are truly concerned about the world around them. Now, one of the things that turns my stomach is how some of the adults are responding to the climate marches of young people. We dismiss them. In my country, for example, where they say, you know what, all they want to do is skip school. Well, that's a double wake-up call. Apparently, and that's why we need translators like yourselves to say, no, one, it says a lot about us that they want to skip school, and two, they are taking millions of children. They actually are serious about it. But if we can't even take that seriously, I actually would say that going and standing and demonstrating about the environment will do more for your learning than sitting in a classroom learning about the environment. And it's not an either or. I don't want to turn every child into a revolutionary, but it's not even a revolutionary. They're exerting their desire to be part of that world. So I feel that it's also up to us to not hamper that kind of thinking, to not hamper that kind of movement, but to let alone ridicule it, but to actually facilitate it. And not as a little school outing, but to actually say, and you know this more as well, that pedagogically, it says you cannot learn about citizenship, you have to experiencing it. Well, children are making it happen every day, but we're not looking and we're actually blind to that force. The last one is, again, I want to make the point before I move to the last point on this experts. I think the key thing is, again, not to just look for the eloquent children, but look for the invisible children. Look for the children who are maybe not doing so well. Not every child who has been failing and failing can become a Jack Ma, but even Jack Ma wouldn't want every child to become Jack Ma. But we're always looking for the Jack Ma's, no matter how much we love him. But we need to look for who are the invisible and unknown children. And time after time, I see that they're being stigmatized. And finally, very importantly, as a third argument, is that co-creating that school environment and educational approaches with children creates a sense of co-ownership. And we know in education that co-ownership is crucial to learning. It improves the motivation and it improves the outcomes. And we know how important that is. How to put this into practice? I can talk, but I won't do that for many hours about this, because it's been a journey to actually make that happen. It's not easy. Participation, co-creation is a messy, it's chaotic. But now that we know that schools should be zoos, I think chaos is a good thing. So 3 thoughts on how to put this into practice. 1, it's about mindset, it's about processes, and it's about roles. A mindset, very, very simple on paper for adults. Take children seriously. Full stop. Can't make it any easier than that. But taking somebody else seriously, who you think knows less experience, all these kind of things, it's actually about ourselves. To take somebody else seriously who is half my size, who hasn't been around for all these years, actually says, you know what, who am I? Who am I? I have a title, you have things, you are important people, let it go. So taking somebody seriously is letting go of your own ego. Not so easy. Because the educational system has been telling us the higher you come and the higher you go, the more successful you are. And now I'm actually telling you, you know what, the higher you go, maybe the more little you become. The second one has to do with this the chaos of participation. Usually what we do, so this has to do with the second point of process. When you co-create, when you participate, when you have real participation, you cannot say, first we have a plan, we ask you to put input, thank you very much, we go business as usual. That's the normal way of how often participation and co-creation goes. And then at the end, somebody says, oh yeah, didn't we ask those kids to come and give input in the beginning? And maybe we should tell them again what we did. And then you go back to the children, you show them the plan, and they said, well, that's not exactly what we said. That's how we usually do it. So when I talk about co-creation and participation, it's about quality. And it becomes messy. Because suddenly, it's not a straight path, but it actually says, if you ask for input, you ask for input. And that input will be very unexpected, so you might need to take a different turn, and you might have to challenge your initial assumption on the basis of which you started to design your program, your school, the way you design it. And I actually think that every school, why not start by actually telling the kids, co-creating with them, and to say, we have X million budget, how are we going to spend it? And somebody will say, yeah, but they don't have all the answers. You're absolutely right. No one has all the answers. So I'm also not saying that children have all the answers. But in the way, when you start to unravel and build up a plan together, you will create that co-ownership. And so the third element of real co-creation in practice is the division of tasks between children and adults. And that again is a very delicate way of doing it. You have to really make sure that children are giving input in the right moment. You listen, you ask the questions, but again, it's a very complicated process, but it can be done if you have that right mindset. If anyone still doubts that this is real and this can happen, one small example with a great, great mind, many of you might know him, Janusz Korczak. He was a Polish educator in the 1930s in Poland, and he created an orphanage, 200 children, run with 4 adults. 200 children run with 4 adults. They had their own court, they had their own parliament, they had their own newspaper. Very sadly, they ended being taken away. So they ended together. He went with his children into the gas chamber. But he ran this orphanage because he, as a pedagogue, realized that he didn't have all the answers. It can be done, and he is, for me, an inspiration. And finally, some key ingredients, and here I go back to my quotes. The top 5 on elements that I would hope that we and it builds on many of the things that were said already this morning. This notion of autonomy is crucial. This connection with the real world in the educational system is crucial. It also shows that that's why the link, I've been working closely, and I want to do that even more, work with the corporate community and the business community. They need to come into the classroom in the right way. You need translators, you need brokers, but to actually bring that connection with the outside world, because again, that's where the children are, and that's where they're motivated. Third, obviously, the role of technology. Programming, AI, but actually how to build that. And I love this notion of let's not turn children into second-rate machines. The fourth thing that children and young people want is this whole notion of social entrepreneurship. Not just entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, because it's connected to their desire to make a difference in the world. It will stimulate their own curiosity that they are born with, that we have been stifling, but that they're born with, and they want to make that contribution to society. And the fifth element is obviously the type of teachers and the type of school principals. And I think that I'm very glad that that word was mentioned briefly, because we are often overlooking the incredible importance of the people setting the tone, and it's the school directors, who are people who they themselves are humble and look at children in the way that hopefully I've been conveying to you makes a difference, who will shake that hand, who will have that eye. As Kim said, that I quoted from, it's not just about the content, but also the manner in which education is being delivered. 2 quotes before I close that I'd like to share with you, which hopefully convey what I've been doing in a much more eloquent way that I've been trying to capture. So indeed, from Kim, it's not about the content only that is taught, but also the manner in which ideas are communicated. If children and teenagers were encouraged to actively take part in classes at school, maybe they would do the same in their lives overall. Very interesting. Again, she's 18. If students sit at the table writing all day, then why should they expect anything else later? How can anyone be engaged and motivated for anything if they don't experiencing the momentum and cohesion of a team, if their major interactions when working are limited to pen, paper, and task? It could be the beginning of a new vision of education. And the second one from Zhu Ji in China, he's 15 years old, who wrote me letters, and he says, education reform will gradually change to individualized curriculum that meets each student's need in knowledge areas and career path. Students should have a 4-day studying schedule every week, with more choices in studying in a conventional classroom settings and through online classes. For the other 3 days, this is what I love about young people, they're always so precise. For the other 3 days, they will learn from real-world practices by participating in apprenticeship. and internship programs that specialized in their preferred areas. Students will become more and more creative and more motivated, and AI teachers are just a group of mentors who give guidance and advice for a student's self-learning process. That's a 15-year-old advice. So I hope that you will become as passionate as I am about the insights of children. I think you and I and anyone involved in education who is above 18 years old should get out of their ivory towers and to really start listening, to innovate together in a qualitative manner, not as a focus group, to continue the way we have been. It's hard work, but I can tell you, after 10 years of experience, it is life-changing, also for me as an adult. It's the one thing that keeps me sane and not believe in anything that I've been achieving as an adult, but to just be a translator. There's nothing more satisfying than to become a listener and the one asking open questions. And that's when you start learning every day. My next dream is to structurally change educational systems on the basis of co-creation with children and young people. I hope that you will join me in this adventure and that OECD will enjoy me in this venture, because I will tell you, people call you crazy. Not you, me. And that's hard. But it's also a good sign, because it shows when there's resistance, it shows that you're actually doing on the right path. And I believe I'd like to quote and end with a quote of a 12-year-old when I started unraveling notions like innovation and leadership with young children. And we started unraveling leadership. And after all kinds of meandering, we make wonderful big mind maps. And children said, you know what, it's funny, nobody's perfect. Children understand nobody's perfect. That's the starting point. And little by little, we started coming up with a new definition. They came up with a new definition. And there's a lot of verbs in this definition, but it's a new definition of leadership that I think will need to go with this kind of mindset. And that is, as the children said, leadership is learning to let go of thinking you always have the answers. I'm going to say it once again, because there's a lot of thinking. Children say leadership, because nobody is perfect, and yet you and I are pretending as adults to always have to be perfect, because that's what we think our KPIs are. Leadership, and that's what I close with, is learning to let go of thinking you always have to be the best and to always know the answers. I hope that that is what you will become as translators of the worlds between children and adults. And do not forget to give that handshake and look children into the eye. Thank you.